Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
I've always dreamt of getting a book deal to do children's, but I've never really had the book sales behind me or the platform behind me to really get me there. But then this finally one day, I don't know, I kind of begged my editor, and she connected me with the children's department, and I was really extremely grateful that they were like, "Well, you do have this social platform of Our Friendly Farmhouse."
Okay, let's be honest. You may have had a period of time in your life where you thought, how cool would it be to move out, to have some land, to be able to rely on myself a little bit more, maybe have a garden. And even if you were thinking, no, 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 Jules, I only dream about five-star hotels. But you know what? There are some things that can be learned and applied from those who are living that kind of life. I'm Julie Lyles Carr. This is the All Mom Does podcast, part of the Purposely Podcast Network. And today I have somebody on who is going to walk us through all kinds of ways that we can infuse a little bit more of a rural lifestyle, some different rhythms to life, some ways of looking at how we're living. And does it have to be that way? I want you to welcome Melissa Ferguson to the podcast today. Melissa, thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You are so generous with your time, and I know that you've got storms rolling through your area. So we have been playing the Wi Fi game, hoping that it will stay with us. But I'm feeling confident. I'm feeling good. Your signal's good.
Yeah, good. I'm glad that it's going well so far. I'm watching the storm roll out ahead of my windows and hoping for the best here.
That's right. That's right. We're going to keep our fingers crossed. Well, Melissa, you have found all kinds of audience and supporters through your TikTok channel and a variety of other places on social media. I want you to tell the listener where you live, what you do, and what a lot of the public knows you for today.
Well, we live in Tennessee, and I have 4 children. We homeschool, and I'm primarily an adult sweet rom-com writer, and I've done about 8 books, I think now. And I have my first 2 movies coming out next year. I just found out
So
about.
exciting.
So excited. And now for the first time, my children's book released yesterday called Our Friendly Farmhouse. So people know me usually from my Instagram or TikTok called Our Friendly Farmhouse. And that's just where I share like recipes and, probably just little quotes that I like that remind us to like slow down and cherish our family, cherish our children, kind of make childhood as whimsical and special and memory making as it can be, wherever you are. So I don't know whatever form that tends to look like that day. A lot of times when I'm filming, it's just it's never planned. It's just, oh, we're doing something, and oh my goodness, this would be really sweet to share. We got turkeys 2 days ago. I'm gonna share it. After this call, I'm about to go harvest some okra from our garden for the first time and look up how to make pickled okra with my children and make it. And I'll probably share that too. So that's what people know me for. And yeah, that's who I am.
I think it's so fascinating some of the crossover that you and I share because you write sweet romances. I've voiced a ton of audiobooks and for quite a while was doing a whole lot of sweet romances, closed door romances, all of those. And it was quite a fascinating journey. It was a side to publishing that I wasn't as familiar with. I've lived primarily on the nonfiction side, even though I do have some fiction manuscripts rattling around on my desktop, but it is such an interesting world. I did not realize when I got into publishing that romance is really the backbone genre of so much publishing today. It's really the thing that people buy books for and do all of this. So when I listen to you talk about your life, everything from the sweet romances to the turkeys, I'm like, wow, Melissa, you know how to live. You know how to live in a way that's really a renaissance way of life. So tell me how you got into writing the sweet romances, because I know I'm going to have a listener out there who says, "Oh, I've got a book on my heart too. I'm curious how a mom with kids and homeschooling and farming is able to do things like this." So how did that start for you?
Well, it started with about 10 years of rejections and a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
hard work that went nowhere. Um, So for me, I never had any intention of becoming a writer. I never thought being that alone and isolated and writing in isolation was, I'm an extrovert. That never even crossed my mind. Now I do love to read, but when I graduated with my master's degree, I kind of stumbled into writing because I was talking to a friend about a book or some books I had read in my classes that were meaningful to me, and we were talking about it through a philosophy course, and I recommended these giant textbooks to her. I said, "Oh, let's talk." She was very eager, right? And 2 weeks later, I called her up and we're talking, and I said, "Did you read that book?" And she said, "Oh, actually, I read The Hunger Games." And I
Yeah.
was like, "Oh." Oh, right.
Okay.
Like, almost the same thing, but,
Yeah.
it really started, I had a that was right when I had a season where, I went with my husband to he was it was supposed to be a 6-week job, and it ended up being a year-long job where I was with him, but didn't really have the opportunity because we kept thinking it was gonna be short, so I didn't
Right.
get a job. I didn't have friends. We didn't have money. We were living in, like, an extended stay. We didn't have a kitchen. We had nothing. There was nothing. And so in that initial what was supposed to be 6 weeks that turned into a year, I ended up kind of taking a few things that happened in that and thinking, "Well, I mean, I have a laptop. I wonder what it would be like to write messages that I have learned in classes that were meaningful to me in a fun fictional format, kinda like The Hunger
Mm.
Games.
Right, right.
What would that look like?" And so I started and fell immediately in love. So then I spent 4 years writing, kinda secretly, and that 1 year, I really wrote for about 10 hours a day and had no idea
Wow.
what I was doing, but I wrote. And,
Mhm.
then I went to my first writers conference, which is what I would recommend to anybody trying to get into writing. Just jump even if you're thinking, "I wonder what it's like to write a book." Just go to a writers conference. Just start then instead of waiting the 4 years like I did. So I
Yeah,
went
yeah.
to my first and I got rejected everywhere by agents, and, I actually wrote one of my sweet rom-coms. My newest one is called The Perfect Rom-Com, and it's the opening scene of this is at a writers conference, at a pitch session where you go in and it's really overwhelming and you're meeting with your dream agent. You have 15 minutes on the clock and someone's yelling at you. You've got 5 minutes, 2 minutes, get out. And, so I really enjoyed writing that scene in there and kind of like what that experience is like for aspiring writers. But
Right.
basically, I ended up winning a writers conference award there and got my first agent, had a few more rejections. And then finally my agent said, because my first book was speculative fiction, which is
Mhm.
not science fictiony, but not fantasy, but under that umbrella of it. And he finally said, "You know what? Romance is so big. It's a billion-dollar industry." I think it's maybe
Yep.
the biggest. He
It's
said, "Have you"
2,000,000,000 now. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
he's like,
crazy.
"Have you considered doing that?" And I said, "No, I don't like romance." Then I said, "Well, hang on. I really like You've Got Mail, and I really like rom-coms." And, so I went ahead and tried it, and that second book was a rom-com. I got an offer. I didn't take it because the 3rd book I was writing at the same time was a rom-com, and my dream publisher said, "We'll give you a 3-book deal." And that's kinda how it started.
Right. I love that story, Melissa, because I think that for a lot of us who have a dream to do whatever, whether that is writing or it is that we have some music that we want to put out there, or we dream of creating a recipe blog or whatever, we think there's some kind of clear cut template. And we also think that we have to be extremely devoted to some of the specificities of the dream. And yet, just like you discovered, there are times that you can end up in a situation in which you go, I'd never really considered that. And yet, that is the door that God wants to open. And to be willing to be flexible enough, malleable enough to do that is probably really the secret sauce, honestly. When I think about it, when I look at my own process, I always wanted to be a writer. I was one of those.
Oh,
But
ser
man, I had it so in my head how it was supposed to work. And I, like you, have really pushed back through the years on the romance piece. And now I'm all the way around the other end of the horn going, seems valid. I think I wanna try that. So I completely get that piece of the journey, but that willingness to be flexible with what opens up, I think that's really, really key.
Yeah, I think yeah, being willing to pivot and persevering, like,
Yeah.
whatever direction is such a key to success in most areas, and, I've seen that on the writer side, I've seen that on the content creator side, people being quick to drop. You get a rejection and then just say, "Forget it, it's not worth it." Gotta
Yeah,
be keep
yeah,
going. Yeah.
yeah. You absolutely have to. That's just the way it rolls. I love hearing your kiddos in the background. Don't worry about that for 1 second. You've got a whole bank of listeners here who are like me too. They are listening through the same thing. So no worries on your side. We love it.
Okay,
Well,
well,
I yeah, no, it's great. It's great. I shared with you before we got on mics that in this tenure that we've had of the podcast, even though we've had various people on who've talked about nature or different kinds of living situations they have, I don't know that we've really had time to sit down and talk with someone who's chosen more of a homesteading lifestyle. So, in addition to the writing you're doing, there are going to be those people out there who are like, oh my goodness, Melissa's living my life. She's writing books and she's out on a farm with her kids. So, talk to me about how that happened because you said that you'd had this nomadic lifestyle initially with your husband and his work, and you were just kind of moving from this little, extended stay to that one, that kind of thing. When did that idea about, hey, let's kind of hunker down and do something a little bit more associated with the land, when did that start for you?
um, uh, about a week before we bought the land. Um So we were living in a cul-de-sac, and I loved my neighborhood. I love our cul-de-sac. I love cul-de-sac life. I love suburban
Yeah,
life. There are a lot of pros to it, but of course, I've always romanticized and loved the nature aspect of farm life. You know, you pass a cow on the internet, and if you're or internet interstate, and if you're the person who's like cows every single time, maybe
yeah.
you should go move to a farm. Um,
There might be something there. Yeah.
but yeah, my husband was, taking a bike ride. He goes to the mountains and, he comes back, and I did end up putting this in our children's book too. And he came back and he said, "Hey, I saw an auction site on the side of the road, and this land was really beautiful, and, what do you think?" And I really didn't think much of the idea until I drove. I remember driving around the corner and then seeing these gorgeous mountains, the Appalachian Mountains before us, and I was like, "This is so beautiful." It was still very scary.
Mhm.
I really had to weigh carefully, but even so, I was still a little scared. I remember auction the night before the auction being like, "Oh my goodness, I wanna make sure this is a wise decision," because we love where we are at. But then we dove in, and I'm so grateful that we did. I love it, and I would say to anyone else who even when we lived in a big city, even when we lived in Knoxville, I remember we had chickens and we had a garden, you know? You can you can surprise yourself with how much you can have, bees or chickens or a massive there's someone I follow, Epic Gardening, and I believe he's in LA, and he manages to have an incredible garden, and it's just incredible what you can do with a little amount of space. So, anyways, that's how we got started.
How do you define homesteading for yourself? Because when I think somewhat of homesteading, there's everything in my head, Melissa, from Little House on the Prairie, like we're going to go head out and we're going to put stakes in the ground. And as long as we squat on this land, then, the government's going to tell us we can have it, all the way to urban homesteading. Like you're talking about the guy that you follow in Los Angeles. There are some of those here in my area, in the Austin area. Of course, there are people on ranches outside of the Austin area that look more like maybe when you say farming or ranching, I would think that way. But there are also people who have a different definition of it that includes, hey, they're doing their sourdough and they're doing their herb garden outside their little back patio outside of their condo. So, what do you think homesteading means in application to you and the lifestyle that you've chosen today?
Well, I think I would have to look up the official definition. I gotta be honest, I have not, and I don't call myself a homesteader because that feels very I know some people who are, you know, they really make everything they do from scratch, which is
Right, right.
incredible to me, like, how the amount of time invested into doing everything yourself is so intense. Um, that is not me. I am a well, I heard the other day, what is there? A crunchy you can be a crunchy mama, you can be a silky mama, but there's a middle one that's I was like, "Ooh, I feel like that's kinda me." I am probably a little more crunchy. I don't own a microwave, and we keep getting animals every week, and, well, we have a lot of things. But that being said, I also take trips to New York City and, do things that we're excited about. I've been to Target, things like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so, for me, I don't know if what I do qualifies as the definition of homesteading, but I will say I have learned in this process that even the people who are I had assumed before this were very intensely farming, like, very intense, even they specialize because if they're let's say they're doing sheep. They have a lot of sheep, but that doesn't mean they have a lot of sheep and they also have a lot of, I don't know, cattle, and they have all the bees, and they have all the flower gardens, and they have all the vegetable gardens. It's like I've learned most people around me dabble in a little bit of a few things, and then maybe have one bigger thing.
Right.
And that's kinda where we landed. It's like, we have ducks, and we have chickens, and we have gardens, and we now have sheep, and we have cats, and we've had rabbits, but it's not like, you can always add more. You can always also do bees and also can everything you have and also process your own cattle. But I'm also just really impressed by how easy it can be that you're still a farmer even if you don't process your own cattle, for example. And
Right, right.
I just learned most people don't. In fact, we just went to the processor plant and got our first meat back, and I was like, "Oh, even there is a specialty. You might raise the cattle, but you're not processing it yourself." So, it has so many different styles to it. I guess there's so many different people.
Right. I love that it really can be more of a customized thing because I've heard people talk about wanting to embrace a more connected to the land kind of life. And yet, when you look at the totality of what that could completely mean, that can seem really overwhelming. I can remember calling my dad, and we had some friends. We were living in Oklahoma at the time, and they had purchased some land, and they were out on about 70 acres, and they had goats, and they had sheep, and they had cows, and they had this, and they had that. And I really, from a romantic point of view, thought, oh, this is so amazing. And look at this and what they're able to do. And I was calling my dad to tell him about it. And because he had been raised on a farm and in a very rural and poverty stricken area back in Mississippi, he was like, no, 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 you don't know what you're saying. You don't know the level of commitment and how you can't go anywhere and you can't do anything. You've got to take care of all these animals. And I thought, oh, yeah, I wasn't really thinking about that part.
Yeah.
So, what I hear you saying is, there are ways to customize it where it doesn't have to be a full on thing. But because you have such a freestyle kind of heart, how do you make that work with wanting to do the travel and getting the idea for the book and wanting to sit down? And yet you still got ducks and chickens that need to be fed. How do you make all that work and embrace the freedom that you wanted as part of this lifestyle, but keep the routine that keeps everything ticking?
Yeah, yeah. How do you, well, so for people who might wanna be I would love to find the word, the crunchy meat silky sort of mother
Yeah.
who I wanna be able to go to the beach on vacation with my children. I do not want to be like, "Sorry, I have to milk the cow." And so for us, we realized chickens are you just have to have a smart system and you have to be careful what you take on. And it is extremely manageable. Now, granted, you're talking to someone who I learned from scratch because no one taught me anything growing up, right? I grew up in an apartment complex. And
Right.
so this was all new. It's taken us 4 years to get to where we are, and we're still very new, all things considered. But I think anyone can take it on one thing at a time, and if you set up a good system, it really is manageable. So, for us, we have, automatic doors on our and once you research, you'll discover all these things, but it's the setup that is key. So, we have an automatic door so the chickens let themselves out and in every morning and evening. Well, have feeders that hold you have some feeders that are incredible. We still trial and error through feeders, but you have some feeders that can feed them for a week or maybe like 2 or watering systems that you can get to like auto water or hold a lot of water at once. So it's like you can leave for a week at a time technically if you have a
Right.
good system. Now we have a big pasture with our chickens that so they have, like, multiple acres to roam on, and they still put themselves up at night and let themselves out in the morning so I can leave. My sheep are the same way. It's extremely easy with sheep. And well, I do have to we go out and water, but it's like we have a smart watering system. I just last week went and we put in a water line so that it's all the way there's a spigot right there where the sheep are. I just put in a drip irrigation system, which is key for happy gardens. Oh my
Right.
word. I underestimated how epic that would be because it only takes 2
Yeah.
hot days in July to, like, kill all the plants that you've cared for.
Yep.
Oh,
Mhm.
no, especially in motherhood when you're so busy. So, this drip irrigation now, everything's thriving, and I just head out there every long once in a while and cut my okra. Joy grabbed a squash this morning, weed eat a little bit, grab my flowers, and it's like, wow, this is incredible that you can get so many vegetables, so many flowers with very minimal effort. So, it's just kind of realizing what you can do in the beginning with food, water, and shelter. If you can get those in place and pretty automatic, then you're good to have a pretty free lifestyle, And that being said, you don't ignore, like, I don't know, I probably spend more time than I'm saying to you or realizing on our farm, because we're here, but you don't notice it. It doesn't feel like a pain, if that makes sense.
You think that you are in the final round of getting all this parenting done. You've got kids who are in high school, you're starting to think about college, and you're thinking, this is it. I'm Julie Lyles Carr. I'm a podcaster and I'm a mom of 8. And here's what I want you to know about George Fox University. It's a different way of doing college. Why? Because yes, it's all about getting a fantastic degree to set your kid up for their future. They have 60 undergrad programs available at George Fox University. But that's not where the story ends. It's also about equipping them spiritually. If you get out of college with a degree, but you don't have a closer relationship with God, that obviously is going to deeply impact what your young adult life looks like. So for your kiddos, I want you to consider, what would it mean for your child to be able to go to George Fox University, where 93% of George Fox students say they now have a closer relationship with Jesus? George Fox University is located in the Pacific Northwest in Oregon. They have 23 Division III athletic programs, and 100% of students at George Fox University receive financial aid. George Fox University is dedicated to their promise. They want every student to be known for who God created them to be. So listen, parents, yeah, you are getting into some of those final laps, but you definitely want to make these last laps count in a big way when it comes to the legacy of your parenting. So be sure and check out for your student georgefox.edu. That's georgefox.edu. Right. And I feel like what you're saying that I think is beautiful, it applies whether somebody's interested in having a little farm that they're running, or they have another type of project they want to do, or they have a dream that they want to take those early steps on, is really skinnying it back and figuring out how to help make it fit. I think a lot of times we say, well, if it's really important, you'll make the time. But sometimes that making the time, that piece, that time piece is such a huge commitment. You know that ahead of, you can see it and you're like, I don't know how we're going to manage this. I love this reverse engineering of thinking through what things are out there, whether that is swapping out childcare with another mother in the neighborhood so that you can have 2 or 3 hours to work on a project that's a passion project for you, or doing something like taking that watering line out to save a little bit of time. Those are the kinds of things that sometimes I don't know we're great at strategizing for ourselves, or when we see someone else's lifestyle, we don't know that they've leveraged that. And then we can beat ourselves up thinking, well, maybe I'm not making this a priority, or I'm not being brave enough, or I'm not doing whatever, instead of realizing there are mechanics underneath it that can help all those things run and run well. What's one of your biggest surprises? Now, you said you're an extrovert. So, how has that been? Has there been a surprise that you've remained more social than you thought? Has that been something that you've had to switch up in your personality? Or is there something else in this kind of lifestyle that has surprised you?
Okay, well, let me say one more thing on what you said. By the way, with
Yeah.
regard to bread, I love making bread. I love making you mill the wheat berry itself.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, It's literally flick a switch, so you sound awesome for milling your
Yeah.
own beans, but it's a
Yeah.
light switch, and then I use the bread machine, and I feel like I have friends who and sisters who do sourdough, and I've done it, and it takes me quite some dedication or I time myself and it takes 3 minutes in the bread machine and it's just as healthy and just as good for you and it's that
Yeah.
long thing. I'm like, efficiency is, such a secret there for when you're a busy mom and you want that, you want the result, you want the sheep, or you want the bread,
Yeah.
or you want the whatever, but you don't have the time. Anyways, okay, all that's to say, I recommend bread machines
Love
to
that.
everyone.
Yeah, I
Um
love that.
as far as surprises, I'm really grateful that after the long 10 years of rejection or whatever it was, the second my I got that first contract, it has been a very social career. It turned out,
Mm.
I have conversations with my agent, I have conversations with my editor, my marketing manager, my publicist, my readers every day, and
Yeah.
I'm really grateful for that because I love that. Other authors who are more introverted may not love that. I think it's life-giving, to be, working on the business side and have that conversation going.
Right. So no matter where you live, you've got that community built in to your heartbeat of writing, which is such a beautiful thing. And I was really schooled by one of my kids, particularly during the lockdown, because he's a guy who gets on Discord. He does a lot of coding, he does a lot of story writing for role-playing games and that kind of thing. And it was really interesting because while I don't think that every relationship should be online, what was wild, Melissa, was this kiddo, while the rest of his siblings were languishing, looking for social outlet, because he already had a community surrounding something that he loves to do, his need for that social outlet was met better than some of the kids who had been more in real person in real time. And so that was a really fascinating thing for me to be reminded of myself, that sure, we're not substituting out quote unquote face to face relationships. But when you have affinity around a project, when you have something that you love, when you have a community you've built in social media surrounding a topic, those can be really valid, robust, beautiful relationships. And for anybody going, no, 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 I'm like, hey, I submit the Apostle Paul. He was writing letters. He was in virtual relationship with several churches. I'm not trying to over spiritualize this, but I'm saying when you share a heart for something, it really can help scratch that social itch in a way that's really robust. So I love that you point that out as an extrovert. I think that's really a powerful thing to see and hear you say. So talk to me about this children's book project. So you've been writing these rom-coms, you're getting to see things realized into movies. You are using the bread machine, but you're also feeding the sheep. And then somewhere in Melissa's mind, running her little social media empire, she goes, "Hey, we should write a children's book." Tell me how that happened.
Well, I have wanted to write children's books forever. So I may not have wanted to initially write adults books since I was a child, but I think I love reading to my kids, and I've always admired children's books, and it's always been a dream of
Mhm.
mine, and in publishing, it's never been an opportunity until because the children's market is so extremely saturated, right? It's not
Right,
like
right.
even more than the adult market is crazy. What is it? 2,000,000 books come out a year in the adult
Something
market.
like that. Yeah.
Which
Mhm.
is just extremely competitive.
Right.
In the children's book world, I think you have the added challenge of the fact that it does not take it doesn't even take a year to write a book. So
Right.
one person could really throw out a lot of books, and it's hard because there are just limited slots in the commercial traditional publishing world. And so I've always dreamt of getting a book deal to do children's, but I've never really had the book sales behind me or the platform behind me to really get me there. And then but then this finally one day, I don't know, I kinda begged my editor, and she connected me with the children's department, and, I was really extremely grateful that they were like, "Well, you do have this social platform of Our Friendly Farmhouse, so let's utilize
Right.
that," and I was able to get a book deal from it, and my dream would be to do a new book every year, and to really, write anything in children's, but we'll see how sales go on this one because, of course, how sales go on one depend on how well.
That's the barometer. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, how has it been different for you because you're moving really more from the fictional space where you've done the majority of your writing to this point into something that is more nonfiction in terms of talking about your life and what it means to live the life that you're living, even though you're transposing it for children and you're putting into it the values and the things that you're learning in that way. But how has that been in terms of switching into a different part of your writer's brain?
Well, I mean, I think this children's book actually goes from the POV of my son. So
Mhm.
originally I wrote it from an omniscient POV, kind of the this is this family, this is their story.
Right.
But then when I wrote it more in story format, from him being the narrator, um, it still followed. I mean, it followed, of course, the thread of our story and the construction build, but then it continues on. It's kinda like Good Night Construction Site meets, like, a Jan Brett kind of
Yeah, yeah.
where it's like, you're gonna have a message, you're gonna have something behind it, you're gonna be learning something behind it, and the goal, of course, was the illustrations with Gretchen did a great job,
They're
some
beautiful. Yeah.
hand-done illustrations, yeah. So, I don't think it used a different part of my brain because it was a story, and I have written a nonfiction book before, and that was, very different,
Right.
that's your, like, your master's degree kinda paper vibe,
Yeah, yeah,
your
yeah.
academic, and this was just a continuation of that, I really enjoyed it. I don't know, writing children's books was really fun. I gotta say, as a typical adult rom-com writer, it's really encouraging to, like, get that immediate pat on the back when it's taking you not very long to finish a children's book compared to
Right.
the year it takes you to write an adult book. Uh,
Yeah.
so children's books are awesome, I will say.
Yeah, they are. I did one for a client and really enjoyed it. And it's interesting because there's more thought that goes into it than you would think in a certain way because it
And
is a simpler project. But on the other hand too, yeah, that dopamine hit, you get it faster.
oh, yes,
When it goes
about 1 year faster, in fact, yes.
Yes, exactly, exactly. It's not that extended play version. So,
Yes.
well, I just know that we have a gajillion other topics that I would love to hear from you on. We're going to have you back on the podcast, but tell the listener where they can go and find your gorgeous new children's book, where they can find you on social media, all the other really cool stuff that you're doing.
Yeah, well, hopefully I have one of many children's books come out, but my first one is very convenient because it's the same name as my social account, which is
Yeah.
Our Friendly Farmhouse. And I have a newsletter that goes out, if you go to melissaferguson.com.
Perfect. All right. Our friendly farmhouse, Melissa Ferguson, you just, I know, have so much wisdom and so many fun things that you're doing. I mean, we are all learning alongside you. Thanks so much for being on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, friend, you know what to do. Go to the show notes and thank you, Rebecca, because she lovingly puts those together every week. And there's also a transcript there if you want to go and actually review a little bit more of the content. If you're like, what was that they were saying? How did they pronounce that? How do you spell that? You can check that out. Be sure and grab the link from this episode and send it to a friend. That is one of the greatest thank yous you can give us. And we just love when you do that. When you hear something that you know would impact someone you love and you send them the link. It's kind of like, that meme love language, right? When you send memes to people you love, send this link. Check out All Mom Does on the socials and allmomdoes.com. Great community of women in the same seasons of life that you're in. You're going to find encouragement and inspiration. And I love to hear from you too. Julie Lyles Carr, all the places, mainly on Instagram. Come say hi over in my DMs. Tell me about topics and about guests that you would love to see on the show. And I will see you next time on the All Mom Does podcast.